Good afternoon, everybody, and thanks for joining the Industry Insights Digital Summit. Today's topic is using mobile and other tools to track your workforce during a school closure. I'm Rob Tibbs, K-12 subject matter expert for Kronos and previous Director of Payroll for Jefferson County Schools in Alabama, and I'm excited to introduce our panelists. First, we have Lainey Mungui, Business Manager from Ector County Schools, and Julie Devlin, who serves as a strategic advisor for Kronos. In today's school environments, we are faced with many challenges that we must account for. Employees are working remotely, and we have to look for alternative ways to capture time worked and still ensure compliance. Today, Lainey will speak to us on how she adapted to the new norm and how they leveraged their workforce management system to better track and ensure compliance. Lainey, can you give us a brief overview of what changed and how you adapted to employees working from home?
Sure, Rob. So, due to COVID-19, our district's processes began to evolve so quickly shortly after the spring break holiday. So we had all been out, had not been in school. The kids hadn't been in school as well. So when we came back, we noticed, that certain groups of employees were not reporting to work at all because their job was actually directly serving students. For example, our bus drivers, our cafeteria staff, our teachers' aides. Then we had employees that would be rotating from work, working at the office to working remotely in order to comply with social distancing. And so that ended up causing two big changes. So we had an employee's work schedule, and then we had an employee's work location that was changing very quickly. So with the employee's work schedule, we ended up having a couple of big challenges. Being, we had different employees with different work schedules. We had to be thinking of our shortfall, which we didn't want to eliminate. It's a great benefit to our district, a great benefit to our Kronos managers. And then we had the challenge of gathering all of our necessary information that we needed while we were working remotely as well. And so we had to come up with solutions to those problems. And so for the different employees with different work schedules, what we did was we had to really sit down and identify all of our types of employees and ensure that everyone's work schedules were addressed. And then we began documenting the employee work schedules on a weekly basis, kind of as a snapshot, because things were rapidly changing. So we wanted to make sure that from week to week in Kronos, the work week was being calculated correctly. And then, like I said, we didn't want to eliminate shortfall. And so we had to really think how we could continue to leverage our shortfall, and that way our Kronos managers would not be bogged down with a lot of data entry and managing those time cards manually. And so to leverage the shortfall, what we did was we created a pay code that would assist in getting the employee's time card to 40 hours a week, regardless of what they were actually working. And then, of course, on gathering all the necessary information while working remotely, we, while we were creating our process, any questions or gaps, in clarity, we just made sure that we were directing those to the appropriate area for clarification. And then before we went live on our processes, all areas were given a process document to review before going out to staff. That way, no matter what department they called, whether it was payroll, HR, information systems, everybody was on the same page and all the employees were getting the information out correctly that they needed. And so the second challenge, that we had was the employees' working location. So employees, began working remotely. And so the challenges that came with that was quick timelines, of course. This started happening mid to end of March, and we were actually working remotely in the beginning of April. So the second challenge was this had never been done. So we didn't have a book to go find, we didn't have anything, notes from previous, times. This was brand new. And then the challenges of communicating and training staff on clocking in and out when we all were working remotely. And so the solutions for that was on the quick timeline, we had, all boots on the ground. Everyone was working. All staff members were involved to get things done. We had deadlines for each task, whether they were big or small, and we worked off of that timeline. And then regrouping. So every day our staff would regroup daily to ensure that all the tasks were complete for that day. And in terms of everything being new, we had to fully understand our current processes in order to set up correctly. So I think that was a great advantage to us, because if we didn't fully understand our current processes, it would have been really hard to transition so quickly to a new process. And then test. So we used our development environment and tested out, before we went live to employees, every situation that we could think of to make sure that we had the answers to those questions once they started coming in. And then on the communication and training with our staff on clocking in remotely, we kept instructions and documentation similar to the look of what the users were used to. So we wanted to make sure that this transition was very easy. We didn't want to cause a lot of panic. And so we made sure that those job aids that we used were very similar to what they were used to. We specified how employees with questions could get in contact with staff members that could help if needed. So when we did go live, we made sure to address, what if you need help, where do you go, who do you call? And then we just tried to make ease and possible for the employees that have never been in Kronos before. So, we were getting employees in Kronos that were used to just swiping in and out on the clock that were actually signing in to Kronos. So we, thought of how we could make that as easy as possible for them.
That's great. Thanks for sharing. And I'm glad to hear that you were able to quickly adapt and efficiently track the time during the time you had employees working from home. I can only imagine communication and correspondence, had to go out. So can you speak to how you were able to ensure employees were notified and knew what to do during the time that they were working from home?
Sure. So what we did was we had job aids. These job aids were created and sent out via email to our staff after being granted access to work remotely. Instructions were given, like I had mentioned before, on who to contact for assistance. The job aids had the same setup as what they see every day when clocking in using the clock at their work location. So, when something that they're used to. When they go in every morning to clock in, we always have instructions right next to the clock. And we wanted those to look very similar. And then employees were able to speak with staff members via phone calls, Zoom, we would remote assistance onto their computer, etc., in order to ensure that employees felt at ease with the new process and working conditions. We felt that there are times where an FAQ sheet, some kind of document is sufficient. But at this point, like I said, we were really trying to help ease the panic and everything, all the outside issues that were going on with the employees, and really tried to have that actual contact with our people that needed help. And then we had remote working procedures. So procedures were thoroughly tested to ensure they were aligning with all the other procedures that were engaging, and emerging to the COVID-19 in other areas of the district. So, we didn't want to have any type of miscommunication, depending on who you called and what department you called. So we made sure that our processes aligned exactly as they were being made with other outside departments as well. And then procedures were documented and sent to key stakeholders before we went live. So the communication was there, that the key stakeholders weren't seeing it at the same time as go live. And then documenting the process ensured that we had a snapshot or a roadmap of what was done during the time for time card auditing purposes. Going back, we wanted to make sure we knew exactly what we had done and why we had done it for the future.
Right. Great. Thanks, Lainey, for sharing. We all know that in schools, proper change management is critical. And as Lainey discussed, she shared many ways that they were able to adapt and implement change. And, no matter what type of change is taking place, a cultural shift to the new processes or procedures can be challenging when you don't properly communicate and plan. So now we're going to transition to Julie. In Julie's role as a strategic advisor, she focuses on HR, change management. She assists districts in ensuring proper policies and procedures are in place. So Julie, can you give us some tips on enacting a change management strategy, whether you're adapting to a crisis or really even just implementing a new system?
Absolutely, Rob. Thanks so much. And I'm so happy to be here today with all of you. Change management is certainly important. And I do definitely want to talk about it today. So when we're talking about, I don't need to tell you that there's been a lot of change happening in our lives. And work's been disrupted. So change has been forced upon us. But given the opportunity to make change willingly, most people aren't going to do that. When you think about change, our first gut reaction is, no, we won't be doing that. We don't really like to take the norm and kind of go against the grain, if you will. So K-12 education has experienced some of the most disruption of any industry during this time. And I guess I don't need to tell you that because you already know that. But, with things having changed so much, it's really important for districts to have some sort of change management plan in place. And this is to ensure that the disruption doesn't really overwhelm to a point where business can't be done. So to get there are like three main areas that I'd like to focus on. Communicating during the change for sure is definitely important. Revitalizing business process management, and enhancing the employee experience, which is near and dear to my heart as a former HR vice president, former practitioner. So, of course, all of this affects people, and there's opportunities, though, during change. And a lot of the resistance to change comes due to the fact that most people are comfortable, like I said, with the way things are, and they don't really want to change. And the continuing with business as usual and that kind of mentality is really easier than developing new skills and strategies. And, there's a tendency for people to identify with their habits. So it's important that, we're communicating effectively. And a real pillar of good change management is a good communication plan. And, again, to harp on the importance of effective communication, and I don't intend to do that during this whole presentation, but it really is the key. It really is important to ensure that your change management plan gets off onto the right track. So, in times of hardship, ineffective in one way or underutilized and antiquated type communication systems are really spotlighted in businesses and in school districts. And, these are the apex of a positive or a negative employee experience. So hindsight is 2020, but being proactive now will really position your district, for success once the next crisis hits. Not that we want the next crisis to hit, but there's a chance that there could be another kind of disruption in the future, of course. So, using multiple channels for organizational communication is definitely important. Having a two-way communication is also important. So ensuring that you're not just getting messages out to your people, but they're also able to send messages back to you is definitely something to consider. Email, telephone conversations, postings, etc. All of these things are good. And I think that we can't underestimate the importance of over communication in these situations. So this really helps to foster employee engagement. And really, employee engagement is the end goal with all of this when it comes to change management, and to ensure that your employees are understanding why the change is happening, what the process is moving forward, and that kind of thing. So, you really, having the conversation that change is inevitable, is also good to have with folks, because just having that truth and having that honest communication, that honest conversation is important for them to understand why things are happening and why things are changing. So Yeah, be ready to communicate during change for sure. Have that experience, have that change management plan in place, and that's going to really serve your district well as the changes happen, as the disruptions go forward. So the next thing that I wanted to talk about is just some fundamentals of change management. So, it's important to understand how change works. And what you see here is the Kubler-Ross change curve. You might notice that some of the items on this curve are similar to what we know as the stages of grief. So you can see things on there like shock, denial, acceptance. You get the idea. So looking at this chart, you can see that the x-axis focuses on morale and energy and performance, while the y-axis focuses on time. And as you begin to look forward or look back or look forward, you can notice the peak and the valley over the course of the change. And this model can really help you and your workforce adapt to change and move towards success, because that's really what we're looking for, right? And at the end, we're looking for that success. So, think about, where does your district, where do you fall on this graph at this point in terms of the changes that are being made? Because there has been so much disruption. As many of you might be feeling right now, there is definitely risk associated with not having a change management plan in place. And as we start to move towards creating a plan, we need to really focus on these basic fundamentals. You need to make sure that you're looking at your policies. Are they outdated? That's definitely important to consider. Focus on creating things like a remote work policy to start before reviewing other policies. And, in your remote work policy, focusing things on things like internet protocol, VPN access, what are the webcam expectations? What are the availability requirements? Does everyone have internet at home? These are all the things that you need to consider, and you may not have considered prior to this crisis. However, it's never too late to start to plan for the future. So it's important to make sure that all of those pieces are in place. What are some other protocols that might be needed? Many jobs require people to perform tasks repeatedly, and people are used to doing their jobs in the setting where they go every day, right? Now we're taking them out of that setting and forcing them to kind of work differently. And we go back to that change thing. People don't really like change. So, ensuring that you are keeping that in mind as we move forward. So virtual meeting protocols too, these are different than normal days at the office, these virtual meetings. You've probably seen all the memes about the Zoom calls and everything on the internet. And yeah, they're funny, but they're funny because they're true. I'm sure many of you have seen these viral videos, individuals who think their camera is off when it is, in fact, isn't. And you need to make sure that employees are cognizant of where they're working and, most importantly, what they're doing on camera. Don't surprise your folks. Don't surprise your coworkers with video. Make sure that they know that is what you're expecting, if that is what you're expecting. The other thing is, again, checking to make sure that your IT access is there. I'm sure many of you, have had times where your internet might have cut out, or you're having trouble connecting, or maybe you have several folks in your house who are utilizing the internet at the same time. These are all considerations to think of as during a change management process. So it's important to really reflect, at the end too. What worked? What didn't work? What do we keep? What do we change? What additional opportunities are there to improve for change? So, once the process is through, what is it that you can do to make sure that things go better the next time? I think that forward-thinking mentality is definitely the way to go. So,
yeah, no, I agree with you, Julie, and thanks for sharing. We know that proper change management is critical in schools. Through my experience working with schools, though, we've also found huge opportunities for business process improvement. Most districts have been doing the same thing the same way for so many years. So can you give us an idea of how you've helped districts implement new business process efficiencies?
Yeah, absolutely, I can. Just business process management really just is taking a look at different methods that are used to analyze and measure and improve and optimize business processes. And recognizing opportunity is often difficult during uncertain times, but change definitely has to happen now more than ever. So the first step is to evaluate the current state of things like your employees. I often get pushback on changing on business process changes when I meet with districts, when I meet with companies, because people are so used to doing things one way. You have a lot of folks who have been at organizations for many, many, many years, and personally, when I was an HR VP, I also had that same kind of mentality. And it was the mentality of, well, we've done it this way for so long. Why should we change? Right. And we go back to the whole, we go back to the method of, yeah, if it ain't broke, then maybe why are we going to fix it? Well, how do you know that it's not broken? And how do you know that there aren't processes that are going to be better? So, evaluating the current state of the business, and you'll see a direct correlation with the state of the business and the state of your employee engagement. So, you need to identify the areas of opportunity, and you need to look at these redundant and outdated processes that you may have. And there are a lot of costs to doing nothing. I have some regrets during my career. I was 17 years. I was the VP of HR. And as I reflect and I look back, I think, gosh, there were so many things and so many processes that I wish I would have put in place sooner to have made my life easier. And I didn't do it because I was sort of on autopilot. There was a lot of technology that was available that I just simply didn't utilize because I stuck with what I was used to. But had I just taken that leap, and had I gotten rid of some of my redundant and outdated processes, I really could have improved the organizational culture. I could have improved my everyday as an HR professional too. So I want that for you all. I want that for your districts. I want you to take a forward-thinking mentality and have accurate data and timely information. And that data and that information can help you make decisions in real time. And data is truth. And you can always point back to data to say this is why we did something, right? When people ask questions. So I think that that's definitely important. I think that it's also a good practice to act and learn versus taking no action at all. And sometimes we're not always going to get it right, but sometimes taking chances will move the business forward, will move the district forward. So I think the other thing to keep in mind too is this employee experience that I keep referring to. This is created through the kind of messages that you send to your employees. So and you do that not just verbally, you do that by giving them tools that are going to help them in their everyday work lives. So what processes are you putting in place? What processes do your districts have in place that make your employees' lives easier? Because we all know that their jobs are difficult to begin with.
Yep, no, I agree, Julie. And you mentioned employee experience, and that's one thing that we have consistently heard both from you and Lainey. In schools, we know that employee experience is critical to the success of any project, as well as overall retention of those employees and teachers and all of our district employees. Lainey discussed how she created job aids to assist with change management and overall employee experience. So can you give us some insight into ways that districts have implemented best practices around just the employee engagement experience and ensuring that the proper experience for all is involved?
Absolutely. So, you might be surprised to know that in the United States, only about 33% of employees are actively engaged in their jobs. So what does that mean? Well, it means slightly more than half of the employees are also looking for a new job or looking for new opportunities. And of course, in this climate now, there are a lot of folks looking for jobs, but the employee engagement, notion is still extremely important, and it's important in every business, including school districts. So employees tend to have, just as we all tend to have, a sort of grass is greener on the other side mentality, right? Always looking for the next best thing. So what we want to try and do is make our workplaces an employer of choice. And by doing that, making sure that our employees are engaged, that's one way to ensure that we have retention. So engaged employees make it a point to show up to work, and they do more work. There's less absenteeism with engagement, and there's more productivity. So engaged workers are definitely more likely to remain with the company longer. So, we talk about, and you see on this slide here, it says find the key moments that matter. So what is a moment that matters? A moment that matters is this transformational snippet of time where someone does something that makes a lasting emotional impression on how they feel about a certain situation, or your relationship with a certain situation. So there are so many moments that matter on the employee journey, that we have a major hand in shaping. The employer has a major hand in shaping, and I don't think that this can be understated. There are so many different touch points, and we just highlighted 4 of them here on this slide. So the mobile experience, data, the social experience, and then the cloud. We look at these quadrants, and the mobile experience, you provide your employees, that experience is key, right? Think of employees as end user consumers. Think of how much you personally use your phone in your daily lives. I know that I constantly have mine in my hand. And you refer to it probably hundreds of times a day. And our phones are actually an extension of us now. So you need to make sure that your employees can access information easily and quickly, and that the data that they're accessing is accurate. So having a single source of truth that holds employee data is useful to ensure that things stay accurate, and that employees are getting the right information when they look for it. The digital workplace and the tools that districts provide people are really more important today than they've ever been. And when disruptions to businesses occur, the experience you give to your employees is just as vital as the one that you give to them during times when things are steady. And so I think it's during an emergency, how you treat your workers really is going to be remembered, when things sort of go back to normal. And in times of uncertainty and times of adversity, employees are really going to look to leaders in districts to provide tools for things like social interaction, for information, and for a sense of safety. So your technology can really help with this. And companies that provide or districts that provide, employees a good experience, a people-centered experience during these tough times are really going to emerge from this crisis in a better position for success than those who do not. And viewing employees as end user consumers when it comes to looking at a digital people strategy, I think is important. We look at these quadrants here, and we talk about social interaction. Work has changed over the years, and it's gone from a place where we go to get a paycheck, to a place where we go for our social interaction. There are many groups at school districts, reading clubs and knitting clubs and things like that. Work is more than just going somewhere to get a paycheck. So keeping that in mind too. And again, having information stored in the cloud just means that you're going to have the most updated information, and it's always going to be accessible for you and for your employees. So I think that making sure that what I've seen is that districts that focus more on the employee experience have a greater employee engagement, record, if you will, than those that don't. So I think that it's definitely important to have that employee first mentality.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you, Julie. And, we've talked a lot about adapting to tracking time remotely, as we talked with Lainey, as well as Julie shared a lot of strategies that you can put in place to assist with the cultural change that we will see in districts as you implement new technology and as you adapt to, the current crisis that we have around COVID-19. But it's important to also consider these strategies and these tips just for a new technology initiative that you may be rolling out, such as a workforce management system, an HCM system, or even an SIS system and things like that we have in districts. So we hope you've gained insight and into this and start looking at ways that your district could implement and new technology and these strategies. So thanks, Julie and Lainey, for sharing with us. And thanks you all for attending. Please join us in the networking lounge to chat with not only our speakers, but our industry experts and other attendees.